Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everyone. I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com, presenting our third episode of LITSalon Prose Talk Prose. This season, I've had the pleasure of actually meeting most of my authors online. Marty J Smith is the exception, however, because I've known Marty for a long time. He's an editor-in-chief of Lunch Coast magazine. He was a Los Angeles Times reporter. He cut his journalistic teeth, I think, there, or perhaps in local newspapers back in the Midwest, where I think he's from. His latest book, Combustion, is coming out in digital form first, and he has an interesting story about that for all of us authors out here who are learning about the merging of traditional and digital age. Marty, welcome to Literary Salon. I really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll talk about Combustion first, and the fact it's coming out in, is it September, Marty?
I'm not sure. The digital world is very different from the print world, and that the ramp-up time for the release of a novel is not quite as scheduled. So it'll be out in the fall. I'm not sure yet when.
Very good. And then you talked a little bit. You've been writing for, I'm going to say over 30 years. Is that correct?
Oh, gosh, no. That would only make me 10 years old. Yes, I've been a journalist for 35 years. And a journalist in Southern California for 30.
But you didn't become an author until, was it the mid-90s, Marty?
My first novel came out in 1997, called Time Release. And of course, like all overnight sensations, that was preceded by about a decade of struggle and trying to learn the skills I needed to actually execute the novel. I call it the gathering of tools phase. For me, it lasted an extraordinarily long time. I knew journalism. I understood how to be a reporter and how to write stories for newspapers and magazines. But I really needed a whole new set of skills when I wanted to try to learn to write fiction.
And could you, before we get any more specific, any tools in that toolbox you can share that you put in there years ago before that first book came out? Was there a difference between journalism and storytelling in the fiction form?
Well, the way they cross over is in the reporting aspect of it, and the research aspect of it. All the research and reporting I used to do as a reporter, I still do as a fiction writer. It's the storytelling part of it that I didn't really understand as well as I needed to embark on the fiction career. So yes, I needed to learn how to write dialogue well. I needed to learn how to pace a long-form novel. I needed to learn how to structure something that's 400 pages long. Those are skills I did not learn in newspapers, and those were things. The idea of building suspense. The novels I'm writing are suspense thrillers. Learning how that genre works, what the reader's expectations are for that genre. Those were all skills I had to learn, and I wasn't as quick on the uptake as you might have hoped. So.
Would you say that perhaps your journalistic background might have even hampered your ability to kind of break free and go totally right brain in fiction?
That's a great question, and it's very true. I feel like I had a lot of things to unlearn. The idea of, in journalism, the idea is to communicate effectively and efficiently. To boil that down to a phrase, I say that's blurting it out. In storytelling over 300 to 400 pages, you are releasing information and offering the reader facts and information at a pace that builds suspense and builds their interest in the story as they move along. That's very different than blurting it out. And yeah, that was one of the things I had to unlearn.
I know that you now teach at the community of writers at Squaw Valley, and in fact, you just came back from there.
Correct.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about what are some of the basic tools that writers in your workshops are clamoring to get in their toolbox. What any basics that listeners here at LITSalon can take away from this interview? If you had to tell an entry-level writer, fiction writer, a couple of things, Marty,
Mhm. One would be, and I see this particularly among journalists and former journalists, is that impulse to blurt it out. In other words, I use a mathematical formula that's easy for people to remember, and I often flag manuscripts with it when I'm at Squaw Valley. And that formula is 1 + 1 = 0. That means it's possible to diminish something by adding to it. In other words, by adding too much information too soon, or elaborating, or not trusting the reader to understand exactly what an action means, and trying to then, in a clause that follows that action, explain what that action was, that's overwriting. That's an impulse that I think we all have to overcome.
You know, I call it stealing thunder. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, where you're just so, and perhaps that comes from, I don't have the journalistic background that you have, but as you know, I wrote for newspapers for quite a long time, and I'm thinking maybe that's because that's what I had to do when I started writing fiction is quit stealing my own thunder.
Exactly. Yep.
You know, the point of fiction is to ratchet up that tension and to pace it along beautifully so that your reader keeps turning the page. That's the goal, right?
No, exactly. And the other thing I think I focus on when I'm teaching either at Squaw Valley or at Chapman University, where I also teach a course called Writing a Novel, um, is the idea of structure.
Talk to me
You
about
know,
it.
you know, as unique as we all feel we are as writers,
Yes.
um, we all ultimately need to be aware of the three-act structure and the basic three-act structure of storytelling. That's how readers today expect a story to unfold. What I often see among students who are trying long form for the first time is a lack of awareness of how that structure needs to unfold to meet a reader's expectations. It's very simple. The first act needs to be introduction of the characters, an inciting incident, building toward a moment where that reader needs to make a choice. And at the end of the first act, that reader needs to make a choice that's going to complicate their lives in the second act. And all through that second act, there's rising action that their lives get more and more complicated as a consequence of that choice. And when you get to the end of the second act, something cataclysmic has to happen that compels that character to solve their problem that they've created and get themselves into or out of a situation that puts them in some kind of jeopardy. Um, it's a very simple formula. But what I often see are stories that are told in a way that does not make the maximum effect from that basic three-act structure. Now you can elaborate on that three-act structure. You can embroider it. You can bend it to your will once you understand it, once you know the rules, once you know what the expectations are. Then, by all means, make it art. But learn those basics first.
Boy, Marty, if I could, I'm gonna pull that quote from you, and I'm going to be leading my social media sharing with that. If writers would just get that, it sounds, when you decide to write a long form fiction, it those three acts sound simple. I mean, we've been doing it since the Greeks, right?
Right.
So what's the big deal? Except it really is a big deal, and whether you call it stealing thunder, whether you call it, gee, I think I know just a little bit better than they know, whatever it is, if you don't learn the rules, you can't break them later on. And
Exactly.
only really fine writers get to break those rules. And when I tell that to writers in my workshop, some of them get pissed off because they think of themselves as really good writers, and they very well might be. But you've got to learn the rules first. If you
Right.
do that, why would we expect you to be able to deliver what the masters have been delivering for,
Right.
over the ages? So I'm really glad to hear you say that. Segueing to your own work, you have learned the rules, Marty, because you've got several award citations. You've been a nominee for the Barry Award, for the Anthony Award, and for the Edgar, which is uh, I'm just looking at my notes. Your series. Talk about your memory series, because your psychologist went through three books with you. Talk about him, if you would.
It's actually 4 books at this point. There are. This was a series of novels that I started back in the mid-'90s, at a time when our culture was grappling with this issue of memory repression. And what was happening at the time was they were building criminal cases around stories that people were telling to their therapists. I was molested as a child, and suddenly those stories were going from the therapist's office into the criminal courts, which was a very odd and unpredictable period in our criminal justice system. I was very interested in that. I watched the McMartin preschool case where the kids were supposedly led to a certain conclusion by their interrogators. There were several memory repression cases that made big headlines, one of which was in Orange County, California, where I lived at the time. And I got interested in that issue. If we're using memory as the foundation of our criminal justice system, which we were at the time, eyewitness testimony was the most important thing you could have in a courtroom. I think we've got a big problem, because memory is not something that we can trust. Memory is fungible. Memory changes with time and experience, and what you had for lunch affect your memories. And I got very interested in that, and I created a character named Jim Christensen, who is a psychologist who's a memory expert. And I plunged him into 4 novel plots that put him in a position of trying to understand what happened by deciphering memories. And we all know at this point that the phenomenon of memory repression is a lot more complicated than just going in and unlocking a vault in someone's mind and getting memories out, because we don't know whether those memories are real or not. I've enjoyed that series. The 4th of those books came out in December of last year. It's called The Disappeared Girl. It's a little bit more of a personal story with Jim Christensen involving his own daughter. But one of the things I think in the end of my life I'm going to be very proud of is that I flagged an intriguing social.
We're having a little connectivity problem, Marty, which is often the case. So you hang in there.
Okay.
I don't know if it's coming from your end or mine, but I think we're okay now.
I can hear you.
Good. I can hear you too now. So go ahead. And you were saying that at the end of your life, you're probably going to be most pleased about this series because of.
I do. I feel like the role of the fiction writer, at least coming from me as a journalist, is to build great stories around reality. And that was a reality in our culture and our criminal justice system for a long time. And ultimately, the goal of these books is to entertain. Let's not put them on too high a pedestal. They need to entertain. They need to be great stories. But if they can shed light on something that's going on in society, that's a plus. And that's what I was proud of having done there.
And let me just thump that a little bit if I can, Marty, because what I tell writers, and I try to follow in fact, I always follow myself, is that I can only write about what I'm interested and passionate about. I can only write or stay connected to something. I've got to be passionate about it. I've got to be interested about it. And I've got to really need to know a lot more, because otherwise I can't sustain my own thoughts for very long, let alone my protagonist. So I've got to really be just passionate about it, and that's what you just said here, and I want to just thump that for writers. We don't want to go too highbrow here. We don't want to say that it's going to do whatever. But if you're passionate about something, you're going to really explore that on the page and through storytelling. So I think that that's another takeaway from this interview. But before our connectivity just goes to hell, because sometimes it does in live, I want to talk a bit about the resurgence of that series vis-a-vis digital. And I think that was in 2013. It came back out in digital, and in fact, this book that's coming out in the fall will first come out in digital, as you said at the beginning. Talk to me about the influence of the digital age on Marty's novels.
Sure. This was a series that the first three of those novels, of the four novels, came out in 1997. The second came out in 1998, and the third came out in 2001. They had a good run. They did well. The first book went into three printings. It did well in print. But as things happen in print, it went out of print. Probably by 2005, the whole series was out of print, which made them very hard to find. You could get them used, you could get them from other dealers, but they were just very hard to find, and the readership of those books stopped. So if you fast forward to 2012, when Diversion Books in New York went around buying up the backlists of out-of-print authors, such as myself, and reprinting those books in digital form, all of a sudden those books had new life, and they had new audiences. And all of a sudden, I would suggest, without looking at my royalty statement, those books have been read by more people since 2012 than read them since they started coming out in 1997. And they are readers all over the world. People in Australia, people in England are reading those books. Suddenly, one piece of evidence is, over those years, I had a very, a limited number of Amazon reviews. Suddenly, they came out, and within months, that had quintupled. There were more people reading those books than ever. It's a great deal. Like I said, for the first time in my life, I'm getting fresh royalty money. It's mailbox money. It's great money. It's found money. Those books were out of print.
And Marty, a couple of business questions. Did Diversion Publishing, did they contact you?
My agent put my books in their hands, and they bought them. Apparently, the editor there, a guy named Randall Klein, who came from Random House. Interesting that he went from Random House to a digital publisher because he thought he saw the future. He had read my books previously, liked them when he heard they were available for digital. That was a very easy conversation to have.
So that's just another piece of really good news for traditionally published authors who have a backlist. I've had a couple of them on the show, one last year, Brad Battles, who said, he had 15 books out there, and he said, frankly, I'm doing much better now than I ever did, because he's taken that backlist and he's run with it. So then, for you as a traditional author, the digital world was not such a bad thing.
It was not. What Diversion did in my case was they released the first three books in December, and then they released the fourth book, which I had written but had never published, several months later, as a way of sort of, introducing people to the series and giving it new life again. Suddenly the numbers spiked up again. As with print, you need to keep writing books. In other words, to keep that alive and keep people coming back and reading your books, you need to write another book. That's the bad news. We can't just write one and sit back and rest on our laurels. You've got to build your audience, and you've got to keep people interested with new material. And they're going to be releasing my new book, Combustion, which is a standalone thriller outside of that series, in the fall. It'll be digital first. I've got no qualms about that. There's a joy to holding a print book in your hand. You get over it pretty quickly when they start generating money in digital form.
Well, and for a reader's point of view, I love print books, and I always will. No question about it. Behind me, if you can see my library, it's filled with them. However, I'll tell you, when I travel a lot, and I'm a reader, and I fell in love with digital years ago, because I don't have to carry any books. I just got my reader, and I'm good to go. So I love digital for convenience reasons, among many, many other. But I want to talk a little bit, because again, our connectivity is a little shoddy. and we're gonna sign off before it signs us off. Okay. You're the editor-in-chief of Orange Coast Magazine. You have been for a long time. Can you talk just a little bit about the interface between your writing life and your editorial life at Orange Coast Magazine?
Well, I'm one of the lucky people who have parallel careers, both of which I enjoy a great deal. Like I said, I'm a journalist by trade. Magazine writing and magazine editing is something I do that's in my DNA. The fiction and the nonfiction books which I've done are sort of an extension of that. But one of the things I try to tell people is please don't quit your day job to pursue the dream of writing. I have not. I did not do that. And the formula for being able to do that over a long period of time is 10 hours a week. If you can dedicate 10 hours a week of very focused, very concentrated energy and effort toward whatever you do above and beyond your day job to make a living, you can still do both. I've been very lucky in that I've been able to hold a day job, but by adding 10 hours a week to my schedule, that's 2 hours a day, 5 days a week of writing toward a project that I'm working on. I've managed to publish 8 books over the last 15 years and never put my family at risk, which I think is pretty important. I have 2 kids to raise and educate, and never wanted to feel like I was taking anything away from them in terms of financial security to chase this dream. You don't have to, as long as you're disciplined about it and dedicated to that 10 hours a week.
It's funny, Marty, because I interviewed you way back when the first novel came out, and I said to you, how the hell do you do it? Because I knew you had little kids and I had little kids. And what you said was, as I recall, you said you got up at 5 in the morning, and from 5 to 7, those were your bewitching hours. That's when you wrote, and then the kids got up, did the daddy thing, and then you went off to work and they went off to school. And I remember thinking, boy, that's discipline. If you can really do that on a daily basis, that's discipline, and the kind of discipline that a writer needs if a writer's going to also support him or herself. And you obviously have done that, Marty, because you got a slew of books. We didn't get to talk about your nonfiction books. They're fascinating. One about the ducks is just, you are a man who has a range of tastes that is reflected in your fiction and your nonfiction work. I am delighted that you took the time to talk to us today. Again, I could talk to you. Would you come back and talk once the book comes out?
Anytime you want. I'm always happy to do that.
Wonderful, Marty. For those of you who want to check out his website, and I really think that you should, martinjsmith.com. He's got his books, his bio. If you're in Orange County and you haven't seen Orange Coast Magazine, you really should. I wrote for Coast Magazine for many, many years, and Orange Coast Magazine was always #1, and we always tried to top this, and we never did. I'm just delighted that you were here with us, Marty. Until the next time, thank you, Martin J. Smith, and to our listeners at LITSalon Prose, Talk Prose. You just heard a pro talk some serious prose about our publishing business. Thank you, and until the next time, be well and keep writing.
Thank you, Mara. Bye-bye.
Bye.